I'll never forget the Christmas when my daughter told me, "Dad, stop giving my kids stupid old-fashioned gifts." At first, I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She said it with that firm, clipped tone that leaves no room for argument, and I listened. That year, I stopped. I didn't bring a single present. So, on Christmas morning, my grandchildren sat under a glowing tree, staring at empty space where their gifts should have been. My daughter turned to me, wide-eyed, furious, demanding to know why, and all I could say was, "Old-fashioned love comes with old-fashioned gifts." That's when everything shifted. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand how we got here. My name is Daniel Walker. I'm 62 years old, and I've lived my whole life in a small Midwestern town where people still wave at you from the porch and neighbors borrow sugar from each other without hesitation. For 37 years, I worked in a steel plant. It was hard work, long hours, calloused hands, and nights where my back ached so badly I thought I'd never stand up straight again. But I did it proudly because it provided for my family. Family. That word means everything to me. I grew up with little more than love and hand-me-downs, and I married the kindest soul I've ever known, Martha. Together, we built a life on tradition, faith, and small joys. She taught me that gifts didn't need to be shiny or expensive to mean something. She used to knit scarves in front of the fireplace, humming softly while the kids played at her feet. She made every birthday cake from scratch, even when money was tight. She believed that effort was love made visible. When she passed away 5 years ago, a part of me went with her. But I held on to her ways, especially at Christmas. Giving gifts wasn't just about wrapping paper and bows. It was about passing down pieces of ourselves, little reminders that love is patient, love is careful, love takes time. That's why every year I made sure my grandchildren, Lucas, who was 10, and Sophie, who was 7, had something personal for me. I carved wooden trains and toy soldiers in my garage. I wrote little notes in the front of classic children's books, words I hoped they'd read one day when I was gone. I even tried knitting once, though the scarf came out lopsided and uneven. But when Sophie wrapped it around her neck and twirled, laughing, I felt Martha's spirit alive in that room. But my daughter, Emily, didn't see it that way. Emily is in her 30s, sharp-minded and ambitious. She has a good job, a busy life, and she wants the best for her kids. But somewhere along the line, she started to believe that the best meant the newest gadgets, the fanciest toys, the things their friends at school bragged about. She hated the idea that her children might be teased for not having the latest tablet or trendy sneakers. One Christmas, after Lucas had unwrapped a small wooden train I had carved by hand, Emily pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Dad," she said, exasperated, "they don't want this stuff. You don't understand. Kids don't play with trains anymore. They want iPads and Nintendo Switches. You're just embarrassing them with this old-fashioned junk." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Junk. That's what she called the pieces of love I had poured my time into. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that Lucas's smile when he rolled that train across the floor was real. That Sophie, when she cuddled the scarf, wasn't embarrassed. She was happy. But the words got stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded. I told myself she was stressed. Maybe she didn't mean it. But she doubled down. "This year, Dad, just don't. Please, don't bring your old-fashioned gifts. It's time you stop." That was it. No room for compromise. No space for my traditions, my memories, my heart. I went home that night and sat in my living room, staring at Martha's photo on the mantel. I whispered, "What would you do, love? Would you keep giving, even if it wasn't wanted? Or would you stop?" Her smile, frozen in that photograph, gave me no answer. But deep down, I knew I had a choice to make. And that's how we arrived at the Christmas where I gave nothing at all. I wish I could tell you that I brushed off Emily's words, that I let them slide the way fathers sometimes do when their grown children speak sharply. But I didn't. Those words dug into me like splinters, and the more I thought about them, the deeper they sank. I had always believed I was doing something meaningful by keeping our family traditions alive. But now, for the first time, I wondered if maybe I was wrong. For days after that conversation, I walked around with her words echoing in my head. Stupid, old-fashioned gifts. Embarrassing. Stop. I'd sit at my workbench in the garage, the smell of cedar shavings hanging in the air, my carving knife in my hand, and I couldn't bring myself to finish the toy train I had started for Lucas. Every curl of wood that fell to the floor felt pointless. What good was a toy no one wanted? What good was a grandfather who didn't know how to connect with his grandchildren? My relationship with Emily hadn't always been like this. When she was little, she adored the handmade dollhouse I built for her 10th birthday. She used to beg me to tell her stories at bedtime, and she would fall asleep clutching the stuffed animals her mother had sewn by hand. But as she grew older, something changed. Maybe it was college, maybe it was moving to the city, maybe it was just the way the world shifted around her. She wanted convenience, speed, modern comforts. To her, traditions seemed outdated, relics of a past she didn't want to hold on to. And I felt that distance like a wall between us. It wasn't just about the gifts, it was about respect. It was about whether there was still room in her life for the man who raised her, who sacrificed his youth so she could chase her future. A week before Christmas, I went over to Emily's house for dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the kitchen, and the kids ran through the living room, their laughter ringing in the air. For a moment, I let myself relax. Maybe things weren't as bad as I thought. But then Emily looked at me across the table, her voice low but firm. "Dad, I need you to promise me something." I set down my fork. "What's that?" "No gifts this year, not unless there's something the kids actually want." I felt my stomach tighten. "Emily, I've already told you." "No, Dad, I'm serious. If you bring more wooden toys or old books, they're just going to end up in the attic. I don't want the kids pretending to be excited. It's not fair to them." Her husband, Mark, cleared his throat, obviously uncomfortable. "Maybe we could, find a middle ground?" But Emily shook her head, cutting him off. "This is important." The kids, sensing the tension, went quiet. Sophie peeked around the corner and whispered, "Grandpa, I like your gifts." Emily shot her a look. "Go play, honey." I wanted to argue. I wanted to stand up and shout that she was stripping the meaning out of Christmas, out of family itself. But instead, I swallowed hard and nodded. "If that's what you want," I said softly. The conversation moved on, but my heart stayed stuck in that moment. Driving home that night, the Christmas lights twinkled in every neighborhood window, but I didn't feel joy. I felt hollow. Part of me wanted to ignore Emily's demand. To wrap up the train, the book, maybe even knit another scarf, and place them under the tree anyway, to prove that my way of loving was still valid. But another part of me, the tired, grieving part, felt beaten down. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just an old man clinging to traditions that didn't matter anymore. I pulled into my driveway, sat in the car with the engine off, and stared at the darkened windows of my house. Inside, the photo of Martha waited on the mantel. Her smile, frozen in time, always made me believe I was doing the right thing. But that night, even her smile felt like it was slipping away. The days grew colder, and Christmas crept closer. I saw Emily's social media posts of the new gadgets she had bought for the kids, video games, smartwatches, headphones, all things I couldn't compete with. The final straw came when Lucas called me one evening. His voice was bright and innocent. "Grandpa, what are you getting us this year? I can't wait." I froze. The words caught in my throat. I didn't know how to answer. Before I could speak, Emily's voice came faintly in the background. "Lucas, hang up now. Grandpa doesn't need to worry about that." The line clicked dead. I sat there in my chair, staring at the phone in my hand, my heart aching. That was the moment I knew something had to change. Either I kept giving gifts that weren't wanted and lived with the sting of rejection, or I gave nothing at all. And nothing, as painful as it was, felt like the only way to make my voice heard. The week before Christmas, I sat alone in my garage, staring at the unfinished toy train on my workbench. The wood was sanded smooth, the wheels half-carved, but I couldn't bring myself to finish it. It felt like it didn't belong anymore, like a piece of me that Emily had rejected. I picked up the carving knife, ran my fingers over the handle, and then set it back down. The silence of the garage pressed on me. It was the same space where I'd spent hours over the years, crafting gifts with care and patience. But now it felt hollow. For the first time in decades, I had no gifts to wrap, no stockings to stuff, no small surprises tucked away in a corner of the house. And I realized I had made my decision. This Christmas I would bring nothing. But committing to that choice wasn't easy. Every night leading up to Christmas, I lay awake in bed, second-guessing myself. I'd imagine Lucas's eager eyes, Sophie's little voice calling out, "Grandpa, what did you get us?" And I would picture their disappointment when I had nothing to give. The guilt gnawed at me. What kind of grandfather shows up empty-handed? What kind of man lets his grandchildren down at Christmas? Then I would remember Emily's words. Stop giving my kids stupid, old-fashioned gifts. She had left no room for interpretation, and if I gave nothing, I would only be doing exactly what she asked. Still, I wasn't sure if I had the strength to go through with it. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at Martha's photograph on the mantel. Her eyes were kind, the corners of her mouth curved in that gentle smile she always wore when she was trying to reassure me. I spoke aloud, my voice breaking in the quiet house. "What would you do, love? Would you keep giving? Or would you stop?" Of course, no answer came, but in my heart, I felt a strange clarity. Martha had always believed in teaching lessons through actions, not arguments. She used to tell Emily, "One day, you'll understand why we do things this way." Maybe this was my chance to let silence teach where words had failed. As the days slipped by, I made no trip to the store, bought no rolls of wrapping paper, no bows, no tape. My house stayed quiet while the rest of the town buzzed with holiday frenzy. Neighbors waved as they carried shopping bags from their cars, but I waved back with the empty hands. For the first time in my life, I felt like an outsider at Christmas. I told myself it was for a purpose, that the emptiness I carried would mean something when the moment came. Still, every instinct in me fought against it. My whole identity as a father and grandfather was wrapped up in giving. Not just gifts, but effort, time, love. And now I was about to show up with nothing but silence. 3 nights before Christmas, I got an unexpected knock at the door. It was Lucas. His cheeks were red from the cold, his breath puffing in the winter air. "Mom said I could come by," he explained, stepping inside. We sat at the kitchen table, sipping hot cocoa. He looked around, eyes scanning for the familiar sight of wrapping paper or ribbons. "Grandpa, what are you getting us this year?" My chest tightened. I forced a smile. "You'll see, buddy, you'll see." It wasn't a lie, not exactly. He would see. Just not what he expected. When he left that night, I felt the weight of my choice more heavily than ever. But I also knew there was no turning back. On Christmas Eve, I packed my car with a tin of cookies for the family and a bottle of wine for Mark. No brightly wrapped packages, no toys, no books, no scarves, just me. As I closed the trunk, my hands trembled. I almost went back inside, almost grabbed the unfinished train from the garage and wrapped it in a towel, just in case. But then I stopped. If I broke my resolve now, nothing would change. Emily would continue to see my love as junk, and my grandchildren would grow up never learning the difference between love and a price tag. So I whispered to myself, old-fashioned love comes with old-fashioned gifts. If they don't want the gifts, then maybe they'll realize what they're missing when the love feels absent too. And with that, I climbed into the car, the weight of the decision pressing heavy on my chest, and drove toward the Christmas that would change everything. Christmas morning arrived with the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting through Emily's house. The tree stood tall in the living room, lights twinkling, ornaments sparkling, and shiny wrapped gifts piled high underneath. The kids were already bouncing with excitement, their eyes wide as they circled the tree like little detectives trying to figure out which box belonged to them. I sat in the recliner by the fireplace, hands folded, heart pounding. My car was parked outside with nothing in the trunk but an empty tin where cookies had been. No wooden toys, no scarves, no books with handwritten notes, just silence. Mark handed out gifts first. Sophie squealed when she tore into a box and found a new dollhouse. Lucas grinned ear to ear as he unwrapped a brand new video game system. Their laughter filled the room, and for a moment, I almost let myself believe it was enough. But then Lucas looked over at me, his smile softening. "Grandpa, aren't we opening yours next?" Sophie chimed in, clutching her dollhouse pieces. "Yeah, Grandpa, where are our presents?" The room seemed to freeze. I felt Emily's eyes on me before she even spoke. "Dad?" she said sharply. "Where are the gifts?" I shifted in my chair, my voice calm but heavy. "I didn't bring any this year." The kids stared, confused. "What do you mean?" Lucas asked, his little forehead wrinkling. "You always bring something." Emily's tone turned sharp. "Dad, is this some kind of joke? Where are they?" I met her eyes, steady but tired. "You told me to stop giving my old-fashioned gifts, so I stopped." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the crackle of the fireplace and Sophie's small voice breaking it. "But, Grandpa, I wanted yours." Emily shot me a glare, her cheeks flushed red. "So you just punished them. You let the kids suffer because you wanted to prove a point." Her words stung, but I held my ground. "No, Emily, I honored what you asked. You said my gifts were junk. You didn't want them. I listened." "Dad, that's not what she began, but I cut her off gently. "Old-fashioned love comes with old-fashioned gifts. I can't separate the two. When I carve a train or write a note in a book, it's not about the thing. It's about the love behind it. And when you told me to stop, you weren't just asking me to stop giving gifts. You were asking me to stop giving the only way I know how." Her face softened for just a moment, then tightened again, as if she couldn't admit she was wrong in front of the kids. Lucas set down his video game box and walked over to me. His small hands gripped my arm. "Grandpa, I like your trains. Remember the one with the red wheels? I still have it. It's on my shelf." Sophie climbed into my lap, hugging me tightly. "And I love my scarf. Mommy doesn't know, but I wear it at night when it's cold." My throat tightened. Tears pricked my eyes and I pulled them close, their warmth reminding me of Martha's embrace. Emily stood frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth. Finally she spoke, her voice low but trembling. "Dad, I didn't mean for it to come to this. I wanted them to have things other kids had. I didn't want them to feel left out." I nodded slowly. "I understand, Emily, but you forgot something. They don't just need things. They need love they can hold in their hands. They need stories, traditions, pieces of family to carry with them. Because one day, those gadgets will break, and those toys will be forgotten. But the scarf, the train, the notes in those books, they'll remember those when they're grown." Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw my little girl again. The one who once begged me for bedtime stories, who once loved the dollhouse I built with my own hands. Mark cleared his throat softly, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. Maybe your dad's right." Emily nodded, her lips pressed tight, as if holding back an apology she wasn't ready to say. But her silence spoke louder than words. The kids didn't care about the tension. They nestled against me, clutching me like I was the best gift in the room. And in that moment, despite the pain, despite the emptiness under the tree, I felt something powerful. My silence had spoken. My absence had made the truth impossible to ignore. That morning I gave nothing, and yet somehow it was the most meaningful Christmas gift I had ever given. The rest of that Christmas morning was quieter than any I could remember. The kids eventually went back to their other presents, trying to enjoy the gadgets and toys, but the air in the room had shifted. Every now and then I caught them sneaking glances at me, as if they were still waiting for me to pull something out of my coat pocket. But I didn't. I sat there sipping coffee, letting the silence do its work. It wasn't easy. Every instinct in me screamed to reach into a bag that wasn't there, to hand them something that would make their faces light up. But I stayed strong. Because this wasn't about a toy or a book, it was about a truth I had to make clear. Later that afternoon, after the kids had gone outside to play with their new sleds, Emily walked into the kitchen where I was washing my coffee cup. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her eyes downcast. "Dad," she said quietly. I turned, waiting. I was harsh. I know I was. I didn't think about what I was really asking of you. I thought I was protecting the kids from being disappointed, but I realize now I was the one who was wrong. Her voice cracked, and for the first time in years, she looked more like the daughter I raised than the woman who had been trying to control everything. I set the cup down and met her eyes. "Emily, I never wanted to fight with you. I just wanted them to know that love isn't about price tags. It's about effort, it's about memory, it's about family." She nodded, her eyes glassy. "I get that now, I do, and I'm sorry." The words hit me harder than I expected. They didn't erase the pain, but they softened it like a balm on an old scar. That evening, when I was getting ready to leave, Lucas ran up to me holding a notebook. "Grandpa, will you write something for me in here? Like you do in the books you give us?" I looked down at him, my chest swelling. "What do you want me to write? A story or a message? Something I can keep forever?" I took the notebook, sat down in the armchair, and scribbled a few lines. I wrote about love that lasts longer than toys, about memories that never fade. When I handed it back, his face lit up in a way no video game could match. Sophie climbed into my lap, whispering, "Next year, can you make me another scarf? A purple one?" I hugged her close, my voice thick. "Yes, sweetheart, but next year." Those words, spoken so simply, meant everything. By the time the next Christmas rolled around, everything had changed. When I walked into Emily's house, I was greeted not just with smiles, but with a request. "Dad," Emily said, pressing my hand, "did you bring your gifts this year?" And, for the first time in a long time, her voice wasn't demanding or critical. It was hopeful. That year, Lucas unwrapped a hand-carved wooden ship. Sophie pulled out a scarf, purple, just as she'd asked. And in the front of each of their new books, I had written notes just like before. But this time, instead of eye rolls or arguments, there were tears of gratitude in Emily's eyes as she watched her children clutch their old-fashioned gifts like treasures. Looking back now, I realized that empty Christmas wasn't a punishment. It was a pause. It was a chance to show, not tell, what love looks like when you strip away the distractions. Emily learned that tradition isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to protect. Lucas and Sophie learned that not all gifts come in shiny boxes, and that sometimes the simplest ones carry the deepest meaning. And I learned something, too. I learned that sometimes silence is louder than words. Sometimes withholding can teach more than giving. And sometimes the hardest thing a father can do is to let go just long enough for his children to understand what they've been missing. When I think about Martha now, I imagine her smiling at that Christmas, the one where I gave nothing but left everything on the table. She would have been proud, not because I withheld gifts, but because I stayed true to the kind of love we built our family on. So when people ask me what the best gift I ever gave was, I tell them the truth. It wasn't the wooden train or the book with my notes or even the scarf that Sophie spun around her shoulders like a princess. It was the Christmas I gave nothing. Because that was the year my family finally understood that old-fashioned love will always, always outlast the newest toy on the shelf. When I drove home that night, the roads were slick with frost, and the Christmas lights twinkled from house to house like tiny stars. Yet, inside my car, I felt nothing but the heavy quiet of what had just happened. I replayed every word, every look, every tear from that morning. I wondered if I had done the right thing, or if I had gone too far. But when I thought about Lucas resting his hand on my arm, Sophie curling into my lap, and even the way Emily's face cracked under the weight of her own realization, I knew something had shifted. My silence had spoken in a way my words never could. The week following Christmas, Emily called me more than she had in months. Her voice carried a new softness. She didn't apologize outright every time, but her tone said enough. One afternoon, she admitted, "Dad, the kids keep talking about how you didn't bring gifts." Not in a bad way, just in a way that shows it stuck with them. I think they finally understand those presents weren't just things. They were you. Hearing her say that nearly undid me. For years, I had been trying to make her see it. For years, I had fought to keep Martha's traditions alive. And now, in the strangest way, it was the absence of a gift that made the truth undeniable. Lucas came over one Saturday carrying the notebook I had written in on Christmas night. He held it like it was fragile, like it was something sacred. "Grandpa," he said shyly, "I read your note every night before bed. I don't really get all of it yet, but I like the way it makes me feel. Like you're talking to me even when you're not there." Sophie, never one to be left behind, chimed in. "I told Mommy I don't want fancy toys anymore. I just want something Grandpa makes. Can you make me a purple scarf with flowers next time?" Those words hit me harder than anything. I realized then that children don't crave perfection. They crave connection. They don't measure love in dollars. They measure it in moments. Months passed, and Emily started to change too. Little by little, she loosened her grip on the idea that everything had to be new, modern, or flashy. One evening, she called me and said, "Dad, do you still have the old dollhouse you built me when I was little? Sophie might love it." I went into the attic, dusted off that wooden dollhouse, and brought it over the next day. When Sophie saw it, her face lit up like it was Christmas morning all over again. Emily stood in the doorway, watching quietly. When she caught my eye, she mouthed, "Thank you." And this time, there was no trace of condescension or resistance, just gratitude. The following Christmas, something remarkable happened. When I walked into Emily's house, I expected the usual, brightly wrapped boxes, gadgets, games. But this time, right next to the tree, sat a small wooden table covered in handmade gifts. Emily had helped the kids make presents for me. A hand-painted mug from Lucas, a scrapbook of drawings from Sophie, and even a knitted potholder Emily had awkwardly attempted herself. She laughed when she handed it to me. "Don't judge my stitching, Dad. I just wanted to see what it felt like." I smiled, holding it as if it were made of gold. "It feels like love," I told her. Looking back now, I realized that Empty Christmas wasn't just about proving a point. It was about breaking a cycle. It was about reminding my daughter and myself that love has to be lived, not purchased. People often think the biggest risk in love is giving too much, but sometimes the real risk is daring to give nothing when nothing is the only way to be heard. That Christmas taught me that silence can be louder than shouting, that absence can teach what presence sometimes can't, and that love, the old-fashioned kind, is never outdated. So when I tell people the story of the Christmas I gave nothing, they often shake their heads in disbelief. "How could you do that to your grandkids?" they ask. But I smile because I know the truth. That Christmas, I didn't take something away from my family. I gave them a gift they'll carry for the rest of their lives. The understanding that love is not measured in money or trends, or the latest gadget. Love is measured in effort, in thought, in tradition. And sometimes the only way to see the value of something old is to feel the weight of its absence. That was the year I gave nothing. And in giving nothing, I gave everything. And that's the story of the Christmas when I gave nothing. And somehow, it turned out to be the most meaningful gift of all. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a moment where silence or stepping back taught someone you love an important lesson? Share your story down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you found value in this video, please give it a like. It really helps more people find these kinds of stories. Don't forget to share it with someone who might need a reminder that love is bigger than material things. And of course, if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, the best gifts aren't always the ones you can hold in your hands. Sometimes they're the ones that stay in your heart forever.